They called it the Cradle, and the name was not metaphor. It was a nursery for gods, a place where the progenitors had folded their entire consciousness into dormant code and waited, with the patience of the dead, for someone to come and wake them. Serethi Voss had come, and the cradle had opened. Serethi Voss stood at the center of the reconstituting intelligence, and it rose around her like a tide that had been waiting 8,000 years for a shore. The binding scars at the base of her skull blazed white. She could feel the edges of herself beginning to dissolve, not violently, not with pain, but with the terrible gentleness of something that had always known it would win. The architect spoke without sound. It spoke in the language of her own memories, Marin's voice, the smell of iron particulate on dust, the weight of a world she had not known was hers. It offered her everything. It showed her the galaxy as the progenitors had built it, a garden, tended, precise, alive. It showed her what she could become if she simply stopped resisting. Serethi closed her eyes. She thought of Marin's hands, mineral paste residue darkening the creases, the necklace of corroded data chips, the voice that had carried through collapsed tunnels like something geological. She held on. Dr. Iolin Mards stood 12 meters behind her, diagnostic lenses cycling through spectrum after spectrum, and what she read in the readouts made her hands go still for the first time in years. The merge was advancing faster than any model had predicted. Serethi's baseline cognition, the specific signature of her selfhood, was being overlaid, layer by layer, with something older and vastly larger. Iolin calculated the timeline. She spoke it aloud into the comm, her voice flat and clinical, because that was the only way she knew to carry unbearable information without dropping it. Minutes, not hours, minutes. On the Cradle's outer hull, the warship arrived. It had been a House Thyros destroyer, dark crimson hull plating, the closed-fist sigil at the prow. But it moved now with a precision no human helmsman could replicate. Every course correction was exact to the geometric tolerance of the Cradle's docking aperture, as if the ship and the structure were in conversation. The Progenitor script that had spread across the destroyer's interior walls glowed through its viewport panels, visible from outside as a cold, blue-white light that had no business being inside a human vessel. At the forward station of the hijacked destroyer, Lord Thyros stood. His optical implant blazed white, not the amber it had shown for decades, but the absolute white of a system running at full capacity for the first time. His seal ring reshaped itself continuously on his finger, cycling through authentication patterns that had no recipient. The man inside the body had been receding for months. By the time the warship locked to the Cradle's hull, there was very little left to recede. Vex Karan watched from a crawl space in the destroyer's secondary systems corridor, a data tap pressed against the ship's encrypted comm trunk. She was feeding everything to Lysara's flagship. Formation data, the warship's approach vector, the precise frequency of the progenitor resonance the destroyer was broadcasting. Her pale green eyes held their flat operational stillness. She had been in worse positions. She could not, at this particular moment, remember when. Lysara Aethenis received Vex's feed on the command bridge of her flagship and made the calculation in the time it took to press her trembling right hand flat against the forward rail. The Cradle's defense turrets had been active for 11 minutes. In those 11 minutes, her fleet had lost 2 frigates and a destroyer to direct fire, and 1 cruiser to its own starfall cascade, triggered when its captain had fired a full broadside into the Cradle's petal structure, and the resonance had reflected back through the ship's own drive housing. She had watched the cruiser come apart from the inside. She had not looked away. The order she gave was the hardest order she had given in 3 years, of the hardest governance in the galaxy's history. She told the fleet to hold fire on the Cradle itself. Engage the turrets only. Accept the attrition. Hold. On the bridge, the luminous thread of her regent's mantle mapped the systems under her control. Another patch went dark near her left shoulder. She did not look at it. The warship breached the Cradle's outer hull with a sound that the structure's own architecture transmitted as a subsonic chord. Felt in the chest before it was heard, a frequency that the Cradle's walls had not produced in 8,000 years. The breach point glowed at its edges. Dark alloy peeled back in geometric petals that matched the Cradle's own fault line geometry, as if the structure had been designed to be entered this way. Halia Vaughan heard the chord through the floor of the outer corridor and understood immediately what it meant. She repositioned her 11 fighters, the remnant of the expedition's ground force, in the only formation that made sense in a corridor twice human height, with doorways that curved at wrong angles. 2 at the breach point, 2 at the junction, the rest falling back in a chain that could buy time if not hold ground. She wrapped the Progenitor thread irrigation cabling tighter around her left wrist and told her fighters what she had told every fighter she had ever commanded, that the ground behind them was worth more than the ground ahead, and they were going to make whoever wanted it pay the full price. Lord Thyros walked through the breach point. He walked with the stride of a man who had never doubted a room would open for him, and the Cradle's corridors responded to his passage. The pressure glow floor lighting ahead of him, the Progenitor script on the walls brightening as he approached, as if the structure recognized what moved inside the body and welcomed it home. Halia's fighters at the breach point opened fire. The intelligence did not stop, it redirected. 2 of Halia's fighters went down, the body continued. Kale Thyros was not at the breach point. He had come in through a secondary aperture on the Cradle's opposite face, alone, moving through passages that the Progenitor circuitry lit ahead of him. His prosthetic left hand left faint pressure glow marks on the walls when he braced against them in the corridor's non-Euclidean curves. He was moving toward the central chamber. He was moving toward Serethi. He had known, since the moment the warship arrived, that he would not get there in time to stop what his father's body was being used to do. He moved anyway. In the central chamber, the architect rose, not slowly. With its physical avatar inside the structure and the breach giving the intelligence a second conduit, the reconstitution accelerated. The cascading Progenitor script on the chamber walls moved faster than the eye could track. The geometric presence at the chamber's center grew more defined, less like cascading code, and more like something that had a shape it intended to keep. The binding scars on Serethi's neck blazed white from skull to collarbone, the luminous veins spreading down toward her shoulder, her chest. Valan Drace knelt on the floor of the outer chamber, his long, ink-stained fingers moving across the panel of rearranging Progenitor script, as if writing on it rather than reading from it. His binding scars had deepened to their maximum extent, the gold circuitry woven into his indigo robes running hot. He had been reading the Cradle's walls for 37 minutes, and in those 37 minutes he had translated more Progenitor script than in the previous 30 years combined. He had found the kill switch. It was not hidden. The last dissenting Progenitor had written it into the return protocol's architecture, the way a builder writes a load-bearing wall. Obviously, structurally, in the place where it would do the most good. Valan transmitted the severance command to Serethi's comm implant. His voice, when he spoke it, was not the voice of the Archon of the Radiant Path. It was the voice of a man who had spent his life reading a language he was only now fully understanding, and who understood finally what the last Progenitor had been trying to say. He said, it was always meant to be a choice. In the central chamber, Serethi heard him. She heard Ireland's timeline, minutes, not hours. And she heard Valan's transmission, and she heard, beneath both of them, the architect's offer rising through her binding like a tide that had been patient for 8,000 years. She felt the full weight of what the progenitors had built, the infrastructure of a galaxy, the starfall drives, and the irrigation canals, and the sealed domes, and the throne spire rising into orbit. All of it connected, all of it maintained by the network that was asking her to become its center. She thought of Maren. She thought of the data chip necklace. She thought of what it meant to memorize the names of the dead, not to resurrect them, but to carry them forward as something that had mattered. She raised her left arm, the one scarred by chemical burns along the forearm, the one that had always been the mark of a life lived close to the ground, and she pressed her palm flat against the cradle's floor. The kill switch required a fully bound conduit to choose, of their own volition, to burn out their binding connection. It required the choice to be made against the tide, with full knowledge of what would be lost. The last progenitor had understood that this was the only kind of choice that could not be counterfeited, the kind made at the cost of the thing that made you capable of making it. Serethi chose. The light that came out of her was not metaphorical. The binding scars blazed from white to a color that had no name in any human language, a frequency of light that the cradle's walls reflected back in cascading patterns, the script on every surface stuttering, reversing, fragmenting into disconnected glyphs that rearranged once and then stopped. The geometric presence at the chamber's center contracted, not destroyed, not dissolved, but compressed, folded back into the distributed dormancy it had been maintaining for 8 millennia. The reconstitution reversed in the span of 3 seconds. The architect did not scream. It had no voice of its own, but through Lord Thyros's body in the outer corridor, the old lord stopped walking. His optical implant, blazing white for the entire length of the episode's catastrophe, dimmed. Not to amber, not to any light at all. The implant went dark for the first time since it had been installed decades ago in a surgical theatre on a world that had not yet learned what it was installing. For 1 second, witnessed by Halia Vaughan from the junction behind her barricade, and by Thyros, who had rounded the corridor's final curve in time to see it, the body that had been Lord Thyros stood in the corridor with no intelligence driving it, human or progenitor, and the face of the old lord looked like a man who had put something down that had been very heavy for a very long time. Then the body fell. Cale reached his father before the echo of the fall had finished travelling the corridor's alien geometry. He knelt. He put his prosthetic left hand, matte black, exposed joint mechanisms, the mark of a traitor's mercy or a dying man's self-justification, the question that had never been resolved, against the side of his father's face. The seal ring on the old lord's right hand had stopped reshaping. It held a single form, fixed, as if it had finally authenticated the last document it would ever be asked to sign. Outside the cradle, the defense turrets went dark. One by one, then in clusters, then all of them simultaneously, like lights being turned off in a house where the last occupant has left. The fleet's weapons were still charged. The cradle's petal structure still hung open against the 2 brown dwarf stars' faded light. But the turrets were dark, and the resonance frequency that had been threatening the starfall drives had dropped to 0. And the bridge of Lysara's flagship was very quiet. Her right hand trembled against the forward rail. She did not press it flat. She let it tremble. In the central chamber, Serethi Voss sat on the floor of the cradle, with her palms still pressed to the surface, and her binding scars fading, not blazing, not pulsing, but dimming, the luminous veins retreating back toward the base of her skull and then going dark one by one. The reflective quality of her pale grey eyes remained. Everything else that the binding had added to her, the sensitivity to progenitor resonance, the instinctive recognition of the script, the connection to the network that ran beneath every world she had ever walked, was gone. The cradle's script had stopped moving. The walls were dark. The floor no longer lit beneath her feet. Iollan Mards crossed the chamber and knelt beside her and ran the diagnostic lenses through every spectrum she had. Serethi's baseline cognition was intact, irreducibly, specifically, entirely her. Iollan documented it, the first case of binding reversal in recorded history, and then she put the diagnostic lenses aside and sat on the floor of the darkening cradle next to the young woman who had just inherited a galaxy full of infrastructure that was now slowly, inexorably mortal. Vaylon Drace, in the outer chamber, looked down at his hands. The gold circuitry in his robes had gone cold. His binding scars, deepened over 30 years of careful, reverent interface, were fading. He watched them fade with the expression of a man watching a library burn and understanding for the first time that some of the books needed to burn. He began, with his long ink-stained fingers, to write down everything he had translated. Not on a panel, not in Progenitor script, in his own hand, in his own language, on the notation surface of Tessith Karen's leather-bound tablet. Halia Vaughan counted her dead in the corridor. She did not count them aloud. She counted them the way the Ash Singers counted civilizations, by name, in order, without ceremony, because ceremony was for people who had the luxury of time, and she had never lived anywhere that offered that luxury. She wrapped the Progenitor thread irrigation cabling tighter around her left wrist and walked toward the central chamber to find out what they had bought. Kael Thyros would carry his father's body out of the cradle. He would carry it to dust, where the seed lay dormant beneath a rust-orange wasteland that had once been a garden world called Solabri Prime. And he would bury the old lord in the soil of a dead planet that was waiting, without any intelligence to coordinate its waiting, to be something else. The cradle did not collapse. The Progenitor structures never collapsed. They were built to last longer than the civilizations that inherited them, and they would last longer still now, empty and unmaintained, slowly forgetting the language they had been built to speak. The gods they had inherited were silent. What came after was theirs.